Makes a huge difference if you'll do me a favor by subscribing and liking the podcast wherever you listen. It goes a long way. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. Gaurav Suri is an associate professor at San Francisco State University, and he's the director of the Readiness, Activation, and Decision Making Lab, RAD Lab, at Stanford Center for Effective Science in the School of Humanities and Sciences. He's a computational neuroscientist and experimental psychologist. He studies the brain mechanisms that shape human cognitions, emotions, and actions. He is interested in examining the proposition that the mind emerges from the interaction of simple processing units and that these interactions can be modeled using neural networks. He obtained his PhD from Stanford. He also has a master's in science and mathematics and computer science from Stanford, and he's the recipient of numerous awards, honors, fellowships, and research grants. He came to academics as the second innings of his career. Before academics, he was managing director at Deloitte Consulting. He's also the founding member of two successful entrepreneurial ventures. He has a new book with Jay McClellan from Stanford, his doctoral advisor and mentor, The Emergent Mind. And we have this conversation about wonder and awe and curiosity and the importance of science being accessible to the everyday person and communication in that way, in that facet, so that children and adults and everyone can be inspired to want to explore more and learn more and wonder. I hope you enjoy. Gaurav, welcome to the wisdom of life.
Pleasure to be here, Chad. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. My pleasure. We were just talking offline. I wanted to bring this online. You said you like to, you think it's paraphrasing, like it's too limited when scientists are just talking with scientists, right? Or psychologists with psychologists, and you want to expand that conversation. Can
Absolutely.
you,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that ideas are ideas, and either we communicate the ideas in a way that we can interest the generally interested listener or reader, or we don't. And I think there's too much of science being done by scientists for scientists, and nobody hears about it in a remotely digestible way. Not only do we not hear about it, it feels like there isn't even an attempt to, like, why is this relevant? Why are you doing this? What motivated these ideas? What are their consequences? Why should I care? And I feel like a society in general works well when science is not a ivory tower pursuit, but a pursuit that is done by, by the people who happen to be scientists, but also for the people who are consumers and of science. And I feel like no matter how complex the idea, there's a way to talk about it in a way that can appeal to a general reader or a general listener. Now, if the general reader or listener doesn't want to give attention, then all bets are off. You can't get to them. But if they're willing to give you at least a little bit of their attention to see if what you have to say grabs them or not, I think that's all you can ask.
yeah, yeah. I love that. When you were talking there, it made me think of Richard Feynman, the physicist who taught at, I think, Cornell and Caltech. And
Perfect.
people, so much has been written about him that he would take this subject, physics, that so many people struggled with, and he would make it so accessible. And his classes were so popular and his lectures were so popular, seminars, because of that. And I think a lot of times we forget that simple idea.
He did it. He's a favorite of mine. He wrote books like Six Easy Pieces and whatnot. He had so much style. He'd be playing the drums and he knew how to crack safes. He was expert at cracking safes. And he was one of the great physicists that the world has known. And he talked to people in a common sense way. And if something was hard, he'd call it hard. If something was motivated, it could be motivated, he'd motivate it beautifully. I'm not a physicist, but I read stuff by Feynman and I'm inspired by him, and I think he's a role model for what scientists, what we should aspire to be, which is talk to people in terms that are interesting and fun, and invite them to feel the excitement of the ideas. Otherwise, that's That's bad form if we don't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's not only bad form. I'd love your thoughts on this. I think it's also limiting. People don't get the opportunity to spark that flame of curiosity, that interest, that wonder
Yeah.
without some sort of level of accessibility.
Exactly. So if there isn't a initial hook to get someone in, never going to pursue those ideas. That's sad because we know we humans came on this planet about 2 million years ago, have figured, especially in the last few centuries, have figured so much about so much. And for the first time, there's like the knowledge of the world is not contained in any one person remotely, right? I mean, it's distributed amongst people. And so there's all these ideas that are floating. And there is like, why should, if you go and listen to the old science channel on the TV or whatever, they're often talking about UFOs, like, look how fabulous or how mysterious they are. My point is, science is mysterious. There's so much like mysterious in a good way, in an awe-inspiring way. Like, take vision, right? I open my eyes, and my eyes are not cameras. They're not like cameras. They're not projecting what I'm seeing on some screen. There is no screen inside my head. And even if there was, there's nobody there to watch it, right? And yet we open our eyes and we see this stuff, right? I'm seeing my computer, I'm seeing you in that nice green teal shirt.
Yeah.
And this is light hitting my retina, being converted into electricity, being sent to the back of my brain, and somehow producing this immersive 3D experience. Like, and it's not a camera, right? That is fabulous. And we don't understand exactly how that works. We know a lot, but we don't exactly understand how that works, how that comes into consciousness. And that's an example of something that, boy, if we underline it and express our wonder, and how does this happen, and what's coming in, and how is that being converted, and what is the function of this, and we start to make progress on this, and next thing you know, you're deep into neuroscience.
Yeah, how cool. Do you feel like that's being lost, this wonder, this awe in today's society? How do you feel
Totally.
about that?
Totally. I feel like, yeah, somehow we decided in our culture, like America, right? We produce Nobel Prize winners. We have the greatest universities, and somewhere this idea came that there's a nerdiness to science or math, and it's really unfortunate. Like, I'm a scientist, and I love movies, and I love music, and I watch sports all the time, and I used to play sports. Game called cricket, Chad, which I bet you've never covered.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't had it on yet, but I want to because I've coached coached some people with that. That's their favorite sport.
Really? Yeah. So I played cricket in my school. So I think life is this multifarious pursuit, and science connects with philosophy and connects with art and connects with the meaning of life, and it's glorious. It's a human pursuit. And how would we relegate this human pursuit that in part leads to technology and reducing suffering and also tells us about who we are in the big scheme of things? Why would we reduce it to the domain of nerdy scientists? That doesn't make sense to me. And I don't, obviously, people responsible for this. I mean, I think scientists have a lot of the blame. That, this culture, who shapes the culture? We do. We are shaping the culture. Like, we're here and we're talking to each other. I mean, this conversation in some small way is shaping the culture. So we have to shape the culture, and we have to take responsibility for if we've dropped the ball. And I feel like, at least to some extent, scientists have dropped the ball in not communicating about these glorious, awe-inspiring, majestic ideas to people in a digestible way.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's just scientists. I think in a lot of different disciplines that has transpired.
Yeah, this is a curse of expertise, right? Like, it's like you become an expert, and it takes more and more work to get someone who's not in your field to understand what you do. I mean, there's branches of science, like literally 10 people in the world can understand what you do. And that's fine. I understand that things have prerequisites, but we must attempt to at least talk about why we're doing this, what it means if this is true versus that's true, what's at stake. And it doesn't have to be a practical application, right? The greatest ideas, my book, The Emergent Mind, is not about people who decided to invent AI. It's about people who decide to understand what the heck happens in our brains when we think and when we do. And these are people who are just curious. And next thing you know, a few decades later, their thoughts about neural networks lead to artificial intelligence. Now, we were trying to build artificial intelligence for decades before that using ideas that didn't work. And then they tried it with this approach with neural networks and it worked. Now, my point is curiosity is enough for its own sake because curiosity will transform us. We don't know when, we don't know which idea is going to hit when, but without quantum mechanics, without relativity, we wouldn't have satellites. We wouldn't be building quantum computers. And when these things were invented, there were people saying, "Wait, why are you doing this? What's the point?" So there's always that question about a practical implication. My point is that's later on. That's not the goal of science, right? The goal of science is to pursue curiosity because when we do this, amazing things happen.
Do you think we are like born curious and we exercise it, right? Like you go to a little child, they're like asking why, they're so interested. Like when I was a kid, one of my favorite books was the questions and answers book.
Yeah, yeah, I know that book.
You know?
I mean, you still that book's still around, you know? Yeah,
Yeah. So why is the sky blue and what's the tallest bridge in the world and like all
yeah.
these different things, right? Like these different. And but then at some point, like society starts saying like, hey, stop asking why, like stay focused here, we got to get this done. So my question is like, do you feel like it's innate and a verb, or it's a noun?
Well, that's fabulous. I love that question. I think we're born curious and we are innately, as a species, wired to explore the world around us, right? We're not sitting in a dark corner. We're wired to move and see what happens. And when we move, we change the connections of our brain depending on what we learn and what we experience. So I think that this quest to explore in our species and in other species is something that evolution selected for, because if we weren't curious, Chad, we would not survive, right? It's like if we're not trying that berry is to see, oh, I wonder how this tastes, or boy, that mushroom, the one that looked like this last time made my friend really sick, so maybe I'm not going to try one. Or what happens if I climb this tree and look, what's the view, right? I mean, these are things that are core to our survival as and success as a species. Now, what happens is that there's a sadness that happens when a little boy or girl asks somebody, "What about this?" Why? And it's totally fine for somebody to say, "Look, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know why the sky is blue. I mean, give me a break. But it is blue, and that's terrific. And let's go find out." And then try not to talk down to the child, but try to explore together. Right? But what happens too frequently is that our curiosity runs into either bad explanations that don't make sense to us or even negative consequences, and then we shut down, like, wait, this didn't go so well. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that if our culture doesn't sort of emphasize curiosity, if the cool kids aren't being curious about math or neural networks or something, then that's a lot of pressure not to be curious about things. Whereas if you're growing up in an environment where your friends are curious, you have a catalyst to be curious. What I'm saying here is culture matters. And I think curiosity is one thing that should be amplified in our culture rather than pressed down.
Yeah, suppressed or diminished, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like a makes me think of a pot, like a plant growing in, and it's like that soil that you're being nourished in,
yeah,
or diminished, right? Like you're either growing or you're dying.
yeah. That's right. Either roots are taking hold and new leaves are sprouting, or the soil is infertile and it's not allowing interacting with the universe.
When you were, I want to go back to this because I'm curious. Like that's why I'm doing this podcast, right?
Right on.
When you were a kid, was your curiosity about the world and like was that fostered? Was that nourished, or like in your family or your or people that you were around, like friends and classmates, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for asking that. For me, what happened, Chad, was I grew up in India. And I grew up at a time when there was no social media and the TV was really bad. And my parents had a library of books, right? And I think I started reading because some of the books had naughty parts. Like, oh, where's which page has
Yeah,
the scene in it, right?
right.
And then,
I want to get to
and
the adult stuff.
then right, exactly, right? I'm like 13 years old at this point, and I'm reading D.H. Lawrence or something, Lady Chatterley's Lover. And pretty soon an odd thing happened. Like instead of going to the scenes, I'm like, okay, what happened before the scene? And what happened before that? And pretty soon I'm reading novels, like just for the pleasure of reading novels. And that just opened up the world for me, which is like if you start reading, that's a really great way to amplify your curiosity. But it's not the only way. So the other thing that happened to me was I grew up with three friends who we had limited mathematical ability, but we had very grandiose ideas about our mathematical ability. So we thought that we'll just, solve all the unsolved mathematical problems in our 16th summer. And of course we didn't do any of that. But we were talking to each other and, hey, what about this idea? And it was cool and it was fun. And it was like I grew up in a community um, of boys who were challenging themselves with ideas, and I just was really shaped by that experience. So I went to undergrad for math, and I wrote to this professor in Indiana with a paper about math, and that he liked it. And next thing you know, I'm studying math in the university. And so it was books at home. And my mother's sister, who lives in Ohio, she's a professor. She used to send us books, right? Every, like, there was parcels of books, and so you go down to the library and there's books, and that changed my life, really.
I can totally relate. My grandmother used to send me books, and I think I was 12, and she sent me Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
I know the book and I love the book.
And I was like, when I was 12, I was like, I want a football, or like I want a video game. Why are you sending me this? And she's like, two reasons. One, you may not read it now, but at some point you need to read this book. Like it's very powerful, and it's our search for why are we here? Like why do we exist? What's the meaning we can make out of this experience and our purpose? And secondly, she's like, you're a curious kid. Like I think you'll, when you open that and you put down the video game or the football, I think you'll appreciate it. And so some years later I read it and I was like,
Do you remember what made you pick up that book a few years later? Were you bored or what happened?
I picked it up, I think, during college. I want to say I read it. So actually, I think the first time I read it was between after first semester of college in during the winter break. And my first semester was like my worst semester of college and grad school and everything. Like emotionally and score wise, grade wise, everything. And it was a very rough experience. And so I think I went to that being like, man, like I was shaken. And I was like, what? Like, all right, I gotta, read this story about this guy who's like whole different level of being shaken.
Yeah. You know, that book is quite something. I mean, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with, but this, in summary, what that book is about is this guy in the Holocaust, Viktor Frankl, the author of that book. And he is in circumstances that no human should ever be in, right? I mean, there's impending death, and people next to us are dying, and terrific sorrow. And when things he starts thinking about this question about, well, where is my meaning? And is it possible to have meaning in these circumstances? And he comes up with this idea that it is possible that we have the power to create meaning. And boy, that's a great book for your grandma to give you.
Yeah, yeah. And we have Jewish heritage and
I see.
with the Holocaust as well. And yeah, I mean, what a powerful gift.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Viktor Frankl, so I'm a psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I study the brain.
Yeah.
But Viktor Frankl, his ideas are really important in therapy, and he started this whole meaning-based therapy, which is like you sort of solve life's problem by really focusing on your purpose. Like connecting what you're doing now with what your life purpose is. And the cool thing about purpose is I don't think there's one size fits all. I'm pretty certain it isn't. And I don't think there's ordained purpose, which is like this is the purpose for all mankind.
Yeah.
But I do believe that we have the capacity to make purpose. And I believe that we have the capacity to feel that our purpose is transcendent. It's important. And boy, if we can get to that point with purpose, that solves a lot of life's heartbreak.
What do you think are the factors that help us um, get to that purpose, walk that path?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, Chad. There's no one way to go about it, but I have noticed a few things. People vary a lot, right? Some people are energized by ideas, some people are energized by actions. Like my father is a man of action. Don't talk to him about philosophical ideas if they don't have a ready application.
Yeah.
I am much more of a philosopher. I'm interested in ideas, and I don't care if they're is application or not. My son is finds comfort in routine. He's religious, and I understand and celebrate all three journeys in these three generations. And I think that if one is in the realm of the world about work, it's good to do work that one has some natural talent for. People say go find your passion. Well, how do you find your passion? Like passion doesn't grow on trees. Passion is created, right? Like passion has to be cultivated. And I really, it's like I hear this so many times, like follow your dreams and follow your passions. In the meantime, the kid saying, I don't know what my dreams are, what my passions are, right? So my advice there is understand your gifts. Like we all are given gifts, all of us. I mean all of us. And we are imbued by things that, and we may not, our gifts may not be world record gifts, but they're gifts. Somebody can draw, somebody can remember, somebody can hit a baseball. We have gifts. Find your gift and find a way to be in the arena where you use your gifts. And to me, that's a pretty good start to having a meaningful pursuit. I don't think these have to have some rich philosophical you know end game. Doing something that you can do well. You're interacting with people, you're maybe talking, you're teaching, you're good at it, and you're making change, whatever the change is. And I've seen it in a religious context where people do it out of their faith. I've seen it in a scientific context. I've seen it in a sports context. It's a different path for different people. And I think the only way not to do it is to not engage with the world and not engage with fitting our gifts to the world.
Yeah, it's a waste. It's a waste of a life, I feel, if we do not find our gift and use our gift. It's like, what was the point then?
Yeah. Yeah, and Viktor Frankl would agree with that, right? So Viktor Frankl is about the book is called Man's Search for Meaning. And what should guide the search? I think what should guide the search, at least in part, is our nature, which is shaped by our biology, our innate gifts, and our experiences. And so then one goes out in the world and hopefully one interacts in contexts where one can use some of our gifts, and then one is acting in the world. And then next thing you know, one is relating to people. So where does meaning come from? Meaning, I think, comes from work in the world. I don't mean work as a job necessarily, but work in the world. It comes from love, which is love for each other, love for a child, love for a parent, love for each other, love for God. And it comes from love, work, and knowledge, like understanding things. There's a great pleasure in understanding. And not everybody needs to be hitting on all three cylinders, but that love, work, and knowledge for me is a pretty good source of meaning. And I'm I'm not religious, but I totally see how religion can make a big difference in people's lives and lead to meaning for them. And I also think I'm a scientist, but I also think there's many ways to learning and understanding.
What do you mean by, yeah, can you expand on that? What do you mean there are many ways to learn?
So this book that made you invite me to the podcast is called
Yeah.
The Emergent Mind. And in this book, I make the point that listen, we're a neural network. Like when you look in our brains, all you see are neurons, and each neuron doesn't really know anything, right? It just creates electricity. And so the topic that I set myself, along with my co author Jay McClellan, was let's assume that the only thing in our brain are these neurons and they do what they do, which is they make electricity and they connect with each other. And can we, from that, understand how our thoughts come and how our actions come and how our emotions come? And we get a pretty long way in realizing that, boy, we can, right? We really can see how the input of an oncoming bus coming through our eyes starts activity in some neurons which signal activity in other neurons that they're connected to, which signal a muscle in our leg to move out of the way, right? That's a mechanistic explanation of how we get out of the way of a bus oncoming when all we have is a neuron. We don't have a little person in our head saying, saying hey, move out of the way, because because then the question would be, how does the little person know? And that would be the question. So following neural networks, I come to this realization that all we need is neurons doing what the neurons do, which is make electricity and connect to other neurons. And then I come to this realization that, wow, we all are basically the same thing because all of us have neurons. Okay, it's true that my neurons, Chad, are differently connected, slight differences in connections based on our differing biology and our differing biological heritage and our differing experiences. But a lot of it, in a deep sense, is the same thing, right? It's the same thing. We're getting input from the world, we're converting it to electricity. These patterns of electricity produce our actions and thoughts. And I realize this, and I come to this realization that I am thou, thou art me. This thing that we're deeply connected, that we are like the universe, we're a process in the universe, not unlike the trees and the stars, right? Not more than the trees and the stars, but also not less than the trees and stars. We're a process. So I come to this from a very biological, scientific understanding of what makes our thoughts. And I spent the last 5 years putting this understanding into this book. And then I'm reading philosophical texts from various points in history where people basically say the exact same idea, which is, I am the universe. This idea is at least 3,000 years old. I am the universe. Now, they don't specify how I am the universe, right? It's this realization that they get to through meditation, through thought, through deeply pondering. And I celebrate that, right? It's not my way. I need the evidence. I need to understand the mechanism. But I understand that there are many ways to realize things, right? And different people choose their ways. Now, my way is a way rooted in science and observation and calculation, and it leads me to these philosophical insights, and people get to those through other ways, and that's great.
Yeah, that is. And I love that you appreciate that diversity.
I do really. I think that one of the things we scientists need to do better is to be better storytellers, because I think that science has great answers, but stories tell us what questions to ask in the first place. Science will not tell you what questions are important, or they stir us. They stir the imagination and they make us curious and they want to make us say, what's next? What's next? We talked about this already. So, what we do in the book is there are these snippets of conversation between an economist and Sigmund Freud. And they're talking about, hey, why do we do the things that we do? And the economist is saying, we do them because we're rational. And Freud is saying, no, 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 it's the unconscious. And we're trying to make sense of this, right? And we kind of tell a mini story about it in a play. And then we get to, okay, well, what do we know about it from science? I really think, to your point, which is this multiple ways of knowing, multiple ways of getting our emotions and motivations aroused. And too often we ignore the fact that to do science, we need to be motivated to do science. And like any motivation, that has to come from our bodies, the people around us, the role models. It has to matter, and stories matter, right? Stories are what matters. And so I feel like science and storytelling should be very integrated, and I've tried to do that with a lot of my work.
Yeah, and you wrote a novel back in the day, right?
Yeah, thanks. You check that out, Chad. That's great. I wasn't going to go into that, but
So you have a past in storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. So this novel is called A Certain Ambiguity, and my training, as I early training was in math. I told you,
Yeah.
and this whole novel is about, well, how do we know the things that we know, and can we be certain about anything? And it's very tempting sometimes to think of knowledge as like this computer in our brains. Like the computer knows that one plus one is two because it just knows through evolution or God or something. Well, one plus one is two, but one raindrop on the windowsill plus another raindrop on the windowsill is one raindrop. It's not two raindrops. So it depends on how you define this plus business and what the context of one plus one is. And I really was struck by the fact that things that we feel are so certain, right? Everybody's so certain about everything. They're just certain in a particular context, right? And you change the context slightly, and maybe those same things aren't true anymore. And so that eventually got me to understanding what the brain is doing. And the second book, 15 years later.
So you were in undergrad in math, right? And then a master's in mathematics, right? And so it was this like idea percolating, this going, well, wait a sec, maybe what we don't know is more intriguing than what we do know. And it's like rolling around that goes, okay, I'm gonna go do a PhD in, not in math, but in
Yeah, in neuroscience and psychology.
yeah.
You
Was that
got
the
it.
case or yeah?
You said it beautifully. I mean, I'm
Thanks.
realizing things about myself.
That's what I
Yeah.
do here.
It's like I'm doing the math and I'm realizing that math feels like it's the language of the universe, but it's actually a human construction. I've got some sheep and you've got some sheep, and I want to know how many more you have than me. Or we're brothers and our father wants to divide the land into two, and I need to do a division. Or I need to multiply something, right? And so we invent numbers. And now, numbers, this invention, is really good at expressing patterns that are in the universe. So I start realizing that, boy, we invented these things in a particular context, and the thoughts that we think are in a particular context. And it's not like a computer. Our brain is not like a error-free calculating machine. It's not at all a calculating machine. It's actually neurons connected to other neurons. That's all it is. And we can make calculations out of that system. And so it was very much this realization that, boy, what's interesting is what I don't know about this. Where is it coming from? That led me to keep asking questions and go from being a graduate student in math to, in my midlife, doing a PhD and thinking about why we do the things that we do.
And having Jay as your graduate advisor.
Yeah, he was a mentor. I took a class of his, and at this point, I'm asking questions about, gee, why do we have language? And that people would say, oh, that's that brain area, and that's not a satisfying explanation, right? So that okay, it's a brain area. It's not in my toe. It's not in my stomach. It's in the brain. But what's happening? What's making me talk or read or draw? And Jay, this was now over a decade ago,
Yeah.
starts talking to me about neural networks, and I'm like, I'm okay with math, and I can follow along and do a little programming and follow the activations. And really, Chad, you don't need math for neural networks. It's like it's expressed in math because you can easily write a program. All you need to do is really follow this activates that, and it happens again and again, and the connections change. And pretty soon I'm realizing that this feels like a really useful way to think about what we are, because when you look in the brain, that's what we have, and these little software models are behaving like humans behave, and it starts to make sense to me. And next thing you know, I'm taking Jay's classes, and then we write a paper together, and we realize that decisions don't really come out of maximizing pleasure. Like some decisions come out of habits, and decisions come out of what we are paying attention to, and what around us people are doing, and what advertising we've seen. And it's probably a myth to say that we have a computer that knows the best decision. No, we don't. So we write a paper about that. Now we're friends and we're going out on walks, and I'm thinking, these ideas of neural networks are so powerful that it's a shame that we don't know about them in general, right? My journey was, I spent decades in the wilderness looking for these answers. And so one of those walks, and I kind of remember where it was. I live in near Palo Alto,
Yeah.
there's these hills near there, or Rastradero, and we're walking, and I'm like, yeah, this should really be a book. And it took, it took 5 years to make it happen, but it did happen, and it really connects, Chad, for me, this idea that we can understand, we can explain, we can retain the storytelling, we can retain the majesty, make it fun, and introduce people to what we really are.
Do you think there's a saying, when your body moves, your mind grooves?
Yeah, yeah, I love that saying. I think that the mind is really, like, if we weren't moving, I don't think we'd need a brain, right? So
Yeah.
there's this sea creature that it moves around, it swims in its early life, and then in midlife, it attaches to a rock, and it stops moving after that. And the first thing it does when it sort of attaches itself to a rock, it eats its own brain because
No
it doesn't need it
way.
anymore.
Well,
So it's like, I think we're biological creatures, and we need to move to eat, right? We need to farm or hunt or whatever, gather berries or mushrooms. We need to move. And in a very deep way, movement is what the mind is about. Very deep way. And and of course, we have a lot of, now we can attach thinking to how we're going to move, and we can learn about movement. And but really, there's a argument to be made that we are perception actions machines. We perceive something and we act, and the role of thought is to sort of connect what we're perceiving to what we're going to do.
and do you think that you guys walking and talking, that that had
Wow.
some, yeah, versus sitting like we are, right? Like, where you're sitting in the office or you're sitting in your rad lab, and it's like, do you think that that movement had some kind of effect to this idea generation of the book?
Yeah, I don't know, but I will tell you, all my best ideas, to the extent I have but at least for me, my best ideas either come in the shower or when I'm moving,
Same.
like on a walk.
The exact same.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So we should do a study, and
Yeah.
we should see. And I'll tell you a quick story on this. So I'm not a meditator, yeah, but a friend says you got to meditate. It's cool, and I'm curious. I'm curious about everything. So sign up. Not like normal people will do a 1 hour meditation or something. I sign up for a 2 week meditation course where you have to meditate 10 hours a day, and I'm signed up, and I'm taking time off work and whatnot. And then I read it, and they tell me that you have to sit in a chair and meditate. And that's when I said, I'm not doing this, because, like, I'm when I'm walking, that's when I'm thinking, and I'm happy to call that meditation.
Yes.
But sitting in a chair, that just doesn't feel right to me. So I canceled the meditation retreat.
Well, they call it a moving meditation, walking,
Yeah,
right? And it's same, like, I've done some martial arts, or lots of sports.
yeah.
When you get, I was reading earlier today, um, a book by Richard Schwartz on internal family systems, and he was talking about flow. Like, when you get into that brainwave state, and you're in that state of flow, and, like, he was talking about different sport or some type of movement, and it's just like, I think there's something to that, where I know, like, surfers, or when I'm skiing, it's just like, whoa, it just, like, ideas just like come at me.
Yeah, there's a beautiful book, which I'm sure you know. It's called Flow.
Yeah, Haley.
Yeah, Michele.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the flow is, right? So when we pay attention externally, like if I tell you, Chat, what's one of your favorite songs?
Pretty much like any song by One Republic. I'm
Okay.
blanking on names
So
of songs, but
So
yeah.
let's take a song by One Republic, and let's imagine you're listening to it, and let's imagine that your assignment is to listen to every beat of the drum, to every strum of the guitar, every lyric, every change in melody, every, like, you have to pay attention and not miss any aspect of the song. And I think what you'll find is that within about a minute, you'll find that your mind is wandering. You're not listening to the song with the same intensity that you were before. And this is a thing. Our mind wanders when we externally pay attention. There's something inherent in that. Our mind wanders, Now, in some things, especially these are often things that involve movement, but not necessarily. Sometimes you can get it doing mathematics. One thing is leading to the other. So it's not like you have to pay attention from an external perspective. It's just building on itself somehow. So it's this magical space where it's not forced attention and it's not so repetitive that it's boredom. But it's like there's some machinery in there which is like auto associated and it's building on itself, and you're certainly not bored, and you're certainly not multiplying 829 times 38 20 times over. It's like one thing is leading to the other and you're not zoning out. And that's we experience that, right? It's in this zone between being too boring and too challenging. We call that flow. And one of the things I want to do is sort of understand flow from a neural network perspective. And actually, a student was talking to me about this. I might do some work on this, but it's a fabulous state, and a lot of people get meaning, right? When you experience it, you know it, and when you know it, you say, "Yeah, that's that." Sports is so good at that.
It'd be interesting. Your rad lab is at Stanford, is that right?
I work at Stanford, and I'm a professor at San Francisco State University. The Rad Lab is at San Francisco State University.
Okay. So it'd be interesting to have like the student athletes,
Yeah,
right? Like come in and do some sort of experiment with flow, and like for them to, I don't know, see like, and the coaches to see like, okay, what is happening in the brain when, if this is possible, when they're
totally,
in a state of flow.
totally. The sad part is that it's hard to demand flow.
Yeah.
We know it happens because I think you and I have both felt it, and we've seen other people experience it. But it's hard to do it on demand, and it's hard to do it in a lab because in a lab you're being watched, and there's constraints. And like, are you in flow already? This experiment's 20 minutes in.
Let's go here. Funding. Our funding is running dry.
So I think that constrains people. But boy, I'd love to find a way to study flow. There's a lot of really nice observational evidence about it, even in the domain of sports and arts. And I recently auditioned for a play, and like a theater play, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there in the parking lot remembering my lines, and it was Chad, it was flow, and I was like, wow, what's going on? I'm not bored, I'm not pressured, I'm remembering my lines, and it felt like a flow state. And I remember thinking, I wish I could map the circuitry or map the pattern of this state. I have to believe it's some kind of self-contained attractor state that doesn't diminish, it just somehow maintains itself, and it keeps going.
Yeah, right. That's so cool. That's amazing, right? Like you having that experience when you didn't, it sounded like you didn't expect that at all.
No. And that's a by the way, that happens to be true of flow often. We realize that we're in flow not because we plan to be, like we're in it, right? I mean, I experience it sometimes when I'm teaching. I experienced it when I'm writing, but initially, the interesting thing is that when I was writing the Emergent Mind, the first drafts I'd always get the flow. But then when you do the second draft, there's a very external goal. Like, okay, it has to be, this has to be here, this paragraph has to be moved. So flow was much more likely in that initial writing process when all of it was coming out. Uh, but yeah, I think it's a little bit unpredictable when we experience it.
What did your writing process look like for the book?
Yeah, the writing process was really motivated by the desire to get these cool ideas out there. Chad, I can't wait for you to read the book. Really, just the kind of person you are, and I'd love to hear what you think. And really, there's so many thoughtful people out there who care about ideas, who want to understand who we are and why we do the things that we do. The answers are out there. I mean, I didn't invent these answers. They've been out there for decades, right? I mean, with AI, now we know that these answers are a lot, I mean, they're being developed, and I've written papers refining these answers, but the core ideas have been around. But what's really bothered me was, gee, we don't, like, there are millions of thoughtful people who would love to know these ideas. And it was holding them in mind that was my motivation. I was talking to them when I was writing, and Jay and I would walk, and then I'd write some and he'd write some and we talk about it and it came together. But really, the whole thing was about reaching people like you who are interested in the world, who we think would be interested in these ideas.
Did you record some of your conversations when you were walking and talking with Jay?
No, but I made notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I made notes and I would scribble while walking. And I remember people look at me askance, like, wait, is he out on a walk or what's he doing?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I when I was right, I would often do this. I would get on Zoom or whatever and I would record myself as if I was explaining those ideas to somebody else, like a student.
Yeah.
And that's a really great way to do it because it forces you out of your head and it forces you into the head of somebody you're writing for, somebody who doesn't know the details or anything about what you're saying, but you're talking to them. And this was the intelligent listener, right? This is like you talk to them, and if you can anticipate their questions and anticipate where there might be confusion and so on, boy, that's 80% of the writing, I'd say.
Yeah, like with a topic like this, when I first started, I was like, I said to someone when we scheduled it, I said, man, I hope I can intellectually keep up. You know? What's and why I say that, like, because I was like, this feels like it's gonna be way above my head, right?
Gosh, Chad, I guarantee it's not way above your head. Like you're thoughtful, you're perceptive, you're curious. It's written for you. I hope you give it a shot. The book is on its way to you,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear what you think about
For sure. Yeah, I'm definitely it. And during this conversation, like we were talking about, what I've noticed, right? Like what's become apparent is you what you just said about like your writing process and your thinking process is you do an incredible job of communicating what on the surface might seem like scary, challenging ideas of like, I don't know if I can grasp this, to like, wow, like I'm more and more interested and curious, and this appetite is growing for this idea, this concept, this information, this
it.
education.
Yeah, absolutely. This was the goal. This was the goal, Chad. This is why this book exists because it connects to our opening theme, which is we're not scientists talking to other scientists. We're scientists talking to people who are curious about the human condition. We are on this rock circling a nondescript star, the sun, hurtling in a galaxy surrounded by this little coat of atmosphere. And here we are,
Yeah.
right? And we're having these thoughts and we're doing this stuff. Like, what the heck are we? And Richard Feynman said, if I can't build it, I can't understand it. And in a way, the book is a attempt to build a model, a simple model that can make us understand what these thoughts are. Very accessible, very much about motivating through everyday examples, what we're talking about. And hopefully we've not sacrificed the complexity of the ideas, but we've maintained the accessibility, which was so important to me.
Yeah, I would imagine that what you've done is taken ideas that can be abstract and complex, and there's a saying, and simplified them for an understanding standpoint.
Yeah,
There's a saying, simplification is the highest form of sophistication.
that's right. I think simplification is the hardest intellectual exercise one can do because one is stripping away all that is necessary and one is putting in it's like sculpture, right?
Yes.
And it's like,
Michelangelo.
yeah, you kind of like this all this technical sounding stuff, it's just noise. Like, what is the idea, what is the core idea, and why does it matter? And if it's done right, it's almost artistic.
I would say not almost.
Yeah, thank you.
I would
Yeah,
say it
I
is.
do have to I do have to stop. I'm loving
Yeah.
this conversation so much. You knew that this was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Gaurav, where can people find your book, follow
Yeah.
you in your work, and a closing thought if you would like?
Well, the book is everywhere. Of course, Amazon bookstores. The book is called The Emergent Mind. They can purchase it, get it from the library, and I would love to talk to people about it. Right, so you can look me up on the internet. You can write to me, and I mean what I say. I like to I love these ideas, and I love to engage with people who are curious about these ideas. And I hope I get the chance.
That's awesome. I was watching a video of you. It was 7, 8 years ago. It was on YouTube, talking about your lab
Yeah.
and the Rad Lab. And you said we want people that are curious and kind.
Yes.
And I bring this up because you strike me as embodying both of those characteristics.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I think, Chad, that there's a lot of smart people in the world, right? I mean, but I want to work with people that I can connect with at a human level, and I mean, and they have to be smart because
Yeah.
that makes it interesting. But I don't think smarts is such a premium, right? I mean, people are smart in different ways. There's a lot to learn from each other, and I keep coming back to this thing that we are processes unfolding in the world, right? So I am you in a deep way, just as you are me in a deep way, and boy, that seems really important.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. This was awesome.
I got a sense of your spirit, and I really enjoyed talking to you,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you liked it, please share with a friend on social media. That goes a long way to promoting this podcast so I can continue to interview and share these conversations with fascinating people. You can follow me on social media, Chad Stoloff, and visit my website, chadstoloff.wordpress.com, for more information. I'd love it if you would leave a review to support the podcast. Thanks so much. Until next time.